graph all 6 different ones, different true functions. We're just going to talk about sine and cosine today. Okay, this is kind of like what the standard form would look like of a sine curve and the standard form of a cosine curve. Okay, the number that's on the outside, that's your amplitude. So if you're multiplying, it's scaled by something, that is when they multiply by a number in front. So your A is your amplitude, and that's halfway the distance between maximum and minimum values. So I don't know if you've ever heard of a sine curve or a sine wave in physics class, maybe. Okay, so they all look like this. So A is half the distance between the top and the bottom. Halfway, that's your A. Okay, then the period, because this graph goes on forever, we're going to split it up. We're going to talk about the period of a graph. That's the length of one cycle. Okay, how you find that is you take 2 pi. A normal cycle for sine and cosine is 2 pi. Why do you think it's 2 pi? Because that's a full circle. So a full circle is 1 cycle. Actually, it goes this way. What you're taking is you're taking that unit circle, and we're not going to lay it flat. We're going to find where these points are. It's going to make a graph. Okay? How you find that is you take 2 pi divided by b. B is located, it's a number in front of x. Now, you're not always going to have all this going on. Like a basic sine function is just y equals sine x. But you might have numbers multiplied in front. You can have something added or subtracted in parentheses, which means the graph is being shifted to the right or to the left. And then you can have a number on the outside, which means the graph is shifted up or down. Okay, and if it doesn't start at 0, so if you have something in parentheses, you have to find your new endpoints, which we actually won't talk about that today, we'll talk about it on Wednesday. If it has different endpoints, this is how you find your new endpoints. So it's in parentheses equal to 0, because that's like your normal starting point, and then equal to 2 pi. Are you ready to do examples or not yet? Also, if you haven't noticed yet, I put your next homework assignment up here in the corner. And it's due Friday next week. And you'll test on that Sunday. I'm not going to do like a worksheet review for this one. I'll just do optional review problems that look like it, but not an actual mandatory worksheet. Okay, so first part. You have to be able to find the period and the amplitude before you can actually graph. So if you can't find the period and amplitude, you're not going to be able to graph it. So that's what we're going to do first. unit, that's fine with me. Okay, amplitude. How you find them when you're looking at an equation, it's the absolute value of A. A is the number in front. So if a half is the number in front, what's my amplitude? What's the absolute value of a half?
A half.
Okay, and then to find the period, you take 2 pi divided by the number in front of b, or number in front of x, which is your b. So what's the number in front of x?
1.
So it's 2 pi divided by 1. You have to be able to do this before we can actually move on to graphing. That makes sense? Okay, so what would the amplitude of number 2 be? 3, right? Absolute value of negative 3, which is 3. And then your period would be 2 pi divided by, what's the number in front of x? 1/3. Okay, 1/3. Well, you divide by a fraction. That's the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So 2 pi times 3 would be 6 pi. Alright, one more of these. Amplitude for number 3? 2/3. Okay, then to find the period, you take 2 pi divided by, what's my number in front of x this time? Pi over 10. Good. So this would be 2 pi divided by a fraction, same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So then my pi's cancel, so my period would be 20. Okay, questions over period and amplitude? Because being able to do that is how you're going to be able to graph. Everyone's okay so far? Okay, we're going to do basic functions today. We'll do the more complicated ones, I guess, on Wednesday.
Okay, what does it mean by all period grid divided into fourths?
That's what I'm talking about with graph.
Oh,
Okay. Everyone's good on the first 3?
12.
Everybody's good so far? Okay, so what'd be the amplitude of number 4?
3.
3. What about the period?
1.
2 pi divided by what? 1, so it'd be 2 pi, right? Okay. When we're going to graph these, we're going to graph by hand first off, okay? And every period gets divided into fourths. Okay, so if we're always going to assume that we start at 0, the only time that changes is if you have something in parentheses. There's no parentheses on this one. So we're going to start at 0. Okay, how do I know that's 0? It's not supposed to be like a complicated question, but I had a bunch of questions in the second period about it. How do I know that's 0? Have you never graphed before?
Is that the origin?
That's the origin. The origin 0, 0. Okay? I'm just making a graph. I'm just doing this part of it, not going to the negatives. Okay, that my period is 2 pi, and I start at 0. My first period or my first cycle ends at 2 pi. Okay, what happens if I want to graph 2 periods? Because you're going to have to graph 2 periods on your homework. Where's that going to end at? 4 pi. How do I know?
This is a double.
Okay, essentially double. It's not always going to work. You can't always just multiply by 2. Because when I multiply this by 2, I would end up at 8 pi, and that's not the next spot. You're adding, if the length is 2 pi, and I left off at 2 pi, if I add 2 pi again, I'm at 4 pi. As far as measuring, since you're going to be graphing them by hand, do the best you could. Like, I just took my fingers and I moved them and kind of copied it over. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you want to get a ruler and make it perfect, you can. The reason why I don't give you graph paper is these all change depending on what graph you're doing, like what the equation says. Okay. All periods get divided into fourths. So I'm going to divide my periods into fourths. And I have 2 of them. You have 2 cycles. Cycle and a period are the same thing. Okay, so now I have to figure out what I'm counting by. And this is probably the hardest part for most people. I need to figure out how much is each spacing valued. The easiest way I think to do it, to explain it, if you take the length of your period and divide by 4. The length of my period was 2 pi. I'm cutting it into fourths. So if I divide by 4, each spacing is pi over 2. So this would be, I start at 0, then I would be at pi over 2, then I would be at 2 pi over 2, which is pi, then I would be at 3 pi over 2, then 4 pi over 2, which is 2 pi, then I have 5 pi over 2, 6 pi over 2, which is 3 pi, and then 7 pi over 2, and then 8 pi over 2 is 4 pi. Okay, then the y-axis, this deals with your amplitude. So my amplitude is 3, that means I need to go up at least 3. I usually try to go like 1 above, 1 below. So I'm going to go to 4 and negative 4. Getting it set up is harder than actually putting the points on. Everybody good? Okay, so now you plug in and you solve. All of these values get plugged into this x. Okay, you have 2 options. You can either have memorized the unit circle, which you're going to have to, or you can use your calculator. If you use your calculator, all of these are in radians, so your calculator has to be in radians. Okay? So if I plug in 0, and I'm dealing with cosine, what letter goes with cosine, x or y? X, okay? So if I have 0, cosine of 0, this is my unit circle, I'm looking over here. Cosine of 0 is 1. 1 times 3 is 3. Okay, then I go to my next point, pi over 2. Pi over 2 is at the top of the unit circle. So cosine of pi over 2 is 0. 0 times 3 is 0. Then I plug in pi. Cosine of pi is -1. Pi is over here. You're looking at your unit circle. Okay? X value is -1 times 3 is -3. Then 3 pi over 2 is at the bottom of your unit circle. Cosine of that is 0. 0 times 3 is 0. Okay, 2 pi. Where is 2 pi? It's back at the beginning, right? So the same thing for 2 pi is going to be the same thing we got for 0, because they're the same point. Okay, this is just another circle. So what do you think is going to happen to my points, my other points? Same thing. So I had this as 3. Then my next point after the first one, then it went to 0. Then it went down to -3. Then it went to 0. Then it went to 3. Okay, these don't make points. These graphs are curvy. So when you connect all your points, you need to make them curvy. And I will be looking to make sure that you labeled all of the intervals correctly and your y-axis is labeled. All right, take a couple minutes break. Stand up, stretch. You need to like pause the thing.
Would the next one, like after 4 pi, be 6 pi?
If you want a full period, yes.